Welcome to All Clear, the podcast that takes you beyond the rails. Brought to you by the team at Australian Jumping, this podcast dives into the stories, the people, and the horses shaping our sport. Whether you're a seasoned competitor or simply love the thrill of the clear round, All Clear delivers the conversations that matter. Hit subscribe and join us for a fresh perspective on the sport you love. Jamie Coman is one of the most respected horsemen in Australia. From his early days in the Bega region of New South Wales to his representing Australia at the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games, and then going on to coach and influence generations of riders, Jamie has lived the sport from every angle as a rider, a producer, a national coach and a mentor, and his perspective carries some real weight. Welcome to All Clear, Jamie.
Thank you, Jo. Nice to be here. And it'll be very interesting. Thank you very much.
When people hear your name, many will first think of Sydney 2000. But before we even go there, I just want you to describe for us your journey into horses and into jumping. Where did that all begin and how did that evolve?
Look, Jo, I came from a big Catholic family, 7 children, from a little place just out of Bega called Bemboka, a beautiful little village at the bottom of the Brown Mountain. And we had 1 hour to the snow and 1 hour to the beach. It was just absolutely perfect to live. I would love to take my wife back there and live there again, but she won't go there. But it is an amazing place. Just the geographic of it all is just a little hard to go and do the proper shows. And you've got to travel too far. So that's when Susie, my wife, and I got together and bought a place at Camden and started our business there. So that's where it all started. We met at shows, a couple of shows before, and we kept in touch. Then when you wanted to talk to someone that you liked, you went to an old mailbox phone, good booth, and you put your coins in and you spoke to someone. So I'm going back a long way now. These kids wouldn't even know where they are now, these phone booths. So, so that was the beginning of a wonderful life together.
When you were young, were you heavily into pony club and things like that?
Yes, very much. I done my trade through pony club. My father would take me and we'd travel to Bega in an amazing old J3 Bedford truck with a cattle crate on it, and we would do that. I'd do pony club, and before pony club, I would actually have to go and play rugby league football for the Bega football team and Bemboka as well. And the boys used to always give me a hard time because I had these long creamy breeches on with little riding boots after we showered from playing football. And they'd just go, what the hell? What are you doing? And I told them, I love my horses. I'm going to pony club. And I had an amazing president at Bega Pony Club called Bruce Durant. He was a policeman, but he was very regimental in how we done our group drill and all that sort of stuff. So, that's going back a long time. But I still remember it all because it was so enjoyable.
That does sound like a lot of fun. And then what about school for you? Was school an important part of your life or something to be just tolerated?
I have to be very careful how to say this because I teach a lot of young kids that want to get out of school. I just used to say, hey, I would get up at 3:30, go to the racetrack. My sister, my older sister, Marianne, she was a nurse and she had to go to the hospital to work at 3:30 in the morning. So I'd work at the Gallop track and ride track work from 3:30 till 7 and then go to my master's or my boss. We used to call them masters then. Go to my boss's house for breakfast and then I would go to school and do that. And I did that all the way through. And so I would catch the bus on the way home from school. At 3:30, I would get home at 4:30. I'd sleep on the bus on the way home because I was so tired from riding track work. And then I would work my horses. And that continued. That went on from what they call year 7 now, through to year 12. I was the only one in my family to actually go to year 12. And I don't know why, because I wasn't the smartest in our family, but I had teachers at the time said he must go to year 12 because he should. And my parents took it up and I was not happy, not happy. I would have been much happier to finish at year 10 and start my trade then, because I'd done my trade as a cabinet maker after I finished school. And yeah, then I left to go and continue my show jumping career.
So with the cabinet making, was that going to be your career, or had you already thought that horses could be your career going forward?
Horses were always my career. And the same as the rugby league. Rugby league was amazing. I loved it, but I was too small. And doing my trade, I needed to get a trade because you've got to have something in life in case it doesn't work. So, but horses were always first priority in my mind, always.
If my podcast with Shane Rose, and he said that he was very much into the rugby as well, but he was too small, and so he took up eventing as the safer sport, which I found quite amusing.
Yeah. Now I look at him as a rugby player, but and it is what it is. You have to, at the end of the day, my body suffered enough playing because I was just too small. And I was in between. I was always maybe 4 kilos too heavy to be a jockey, but I could have made the weight. But my master's wife said, you're not going to starve yourself to do that. So that went out of the priorities. I couldn't be a jockey, but then show jumping was always there for me to want to do, So that's what I did. And I obviously loved eventing, but, when I was young, I really disliked the dressage. And now I can't get enough of dressage. I love it. But when you're a boy, all you want to do is go fast and jump, and that's that. And, how high you can jump.
So was it when you met Stu and that you guys thought we can make a business out of this horse stuff? Is that when it really solidified that was going to be your future together?
Yeah, and we'd met a company or a business called EBA, which was George Senna, John McMillan and Rod Brown. And we'd sort of got to know them, and they'd sort of give us a feeling that we could actually produce horses for them to go overseas. There was a market then where we could sell overseas to the Asian countries. And so we really focused on trying to do our best job of producing horses. I remember when we first took our first 5 horses to EBA, and we came away selling none because they weren't good enough, and they weren't educated enough. And the guys just said, well, they've got to be better. If you guys want to be in the game, you've got to produce nice horses. And that's when we went home. We just bought our farm, and then so we started to rebuild our farm, educate ourselves. Susie trained with George quite a bit. I trained with Rod, and John McMillan would look over us and either frown or be happy. And that's where we started, with a really good, just really good friends and good people. And we worked with them quite a bit.
Was there a lot of competition for you back then, or was it more focused on the production of the horses?
Always competition. Always wanted to produce one of our own, or have one each of our own. We'd go through the ranks and be as good as what we could make them be. I always believed that I could make every horse jump. And Susie was a person she was a Queenslander. They were a bit feral. They were a bit wild then. But she became such a beautiful rider, just training with George and then with myself and Rod. But we were always looking to produce what we used to call a maturity horse or a Grand Prix horse. And so there was always 1 or 2 in the barn, hopefully 2, that we looked to for them to go right through. It's always a bit of a luck. You look at every horse and you get them to 135, 140, and, you hope that they can go on. So we had, obviously, horses, commercial horses, and then we tried to have our serious competition horses. So, that's how we worked.
So can you talk me through some of the horses in the early years that were important parts of your competitive career?
Look, when I first started, and before Sue and I met, I had a horse called the Smuggler that was sold. He went to New Zealand to a very good Leanne Chambers, a very good New Zealand Grand Prix rider. And then I had another very good one called Mr. Midnight that Chris Chadwick ended up with. He was a fantastic horse. He was, I think, Chatty, I think he was the youngest guy ever to ride a clean round at Hickstead, in the Hickstead Derby on him. So he was a very, very good little horse. And then I had another little horse and a half brother to him called Bouncer. And through Bouncer, I met my wife, Sue. And he was, again, another stock horse. So I actually started with stock horses. And they became very good. And Bouncer, he was an unbelievable horse. Like, I remember winning I'd never been to a Royal before, and I went to Brisbane Royal, and which was a big journey for me. And I remember him winning. I just started him. I just entered him in part one because I thought, oh, well, he can jump part one. I didn't know how big it was, but I thought, you start somewhere. So I started at the top with him. And I remember him winning the part one. He was the part one horse for that show. And I also started him in the Puissance. And I remember we jumped 6'11". Ron Easy and we both jumped 6'11" in the last round. And we won $126 each. So for doing that. And that's how I met my wife, because she came to me and she said, "How stupid are you?" And I just said, "Well, I don't know any different. This is what I do. I'm a competitor. I want to do this." And so that's how we actually first met. So yeah, that was very interesting. It was. Yeah. But those ones in my mind were very good. And then after that, I acquired a horse from Rod Brown, a horse called Casual, which was called actually then Tony Barlow Casual, because John Fay did originally own it, and it didn't suit him. And it went to Rod, and it didn't suit Rod. And then it came to me. Rod said, "I think this horse will go for you." And I just went, "Oh, okay." And my wife then said, "Yeah, I think it will go for you." We took off the prefix, and he was called Casual. And he was the first horse that I won my first World Cup on. He was an amazing horse to me. And I'm very regretful, but he was sold on to the Koreans. And then he ended up going to Seoul Olympics for the Koreans. That was life. You had to survive, and financially, you needed to do that. So those ones always are in my mind as being amazing horses to get me in the scene.
A quick shout out to Divas Beverages, home of the Glades Cocktail Liqueur and VCAT Vodka ranges. Great drinks, great people, and great supporters of our sport. Now back to our guest. Yeah. And you spent some time over in Europe learning the craft a little bit more. Can you tell us some about that?
Yeah. So then I was asked, Sharon Scott then had an amazing horse. I can't think of his name offhand, but she was asked to go. Yes, Jocks. Yeah. And she was asked to go. The federation here had set up a scheme, retention scheme, they called it, where they wanted 2 horse and rider combinations to go to Europe to train to get ready for the Worlds. She was asked, and I was asked at the later stage in when we were ready to go. Sharon wasn't able to go with family reasons and things, and so I was sort of on the voyage of going to Europe, which I'd never been before, and hardly ever been on a plane. And we had the Australian coach then was a guy called Albert Voorn. And so we would go and base with him and live there and train with him up until the Worlds. So I took a little horse called Modra, which was owned by Miss Cheryl Hunter from Shepparton, just down the road from us. He was an amazing horse. He was never, ever good enough, but he was one of the best horses to go to Europe on, to learn the system and learn. He just coped with everything, and he got some amazing performances over there. So, and I trained with Albert, which Albert is Albert. He's an amazing coach, but he's different. He's so different, but everything has to be perfect with Albert. And he was very good. I worked my butt off for him, but he was good to me as well. He was very, very good to me. And there's many things that I could say, but we haven't got the time about training with Albert. But I based myself there. So accommodation then, Federation gave us $25,000 to get the horse over there, and then to be able to do what we could do. That was never going to go so far because Sharon hadn't gone with me on the pallet, so I had to pay for the full pallet and things like that. So funds were very, very short. So I bought this little red Uno car to get around over in Europe. And I was based at a place called, it was outside of, it wasn't far from the Arns and Edwina's. And it was a very little, but a beautiful village. That's where Albert was based and had a beautiful indoor and everything. And so I said to Susie, okay, so I have to buy a little car to get around in. So I bought this little red Uno, as they called it over there. And I bought this caravan, which was like a toilet on wheels. And I was able to hide it and park it around the back of the shed at stable block at Albert's and plug in power. And when you get to wintertime, it's minus 20 there. It was absolutely freezing. But you do these things because you want to do it. And the Modra horse, he was an absolute little freak. He placed in the World Cup at Amsterdam. He ran fourth in the Horse of the Year Grand Prix at Wembley. I went to Linz to get my last, it was called a COC then. It wasn't called a MRE or R or whatever you call them. He was, and I got my last qualifier there, which only way to get there was I had to drive the truck with all these other horses on it because I couldn't afford transport. So I was the driver. I had a non-speaking passenger groom, which was quite amazing. It was actually quite amazing when we went to the UK because we went to Linz and we done the Grand Prix there and I got my qualifier. I had to jump a 4-fault round in the Grand Prix and we jumped a 4-fault round. I got a qualifier, you beauty. So then I drove from Austria. Linz was in Austria. I drove back to Holland, unloaded a lot of the horses and then put another load on. And put my pony back on to go to the UK to do the Wembley Championship show. And so I drove then down through to France, caught the ferry across, and then we get there and we get dropped off and we're on the Dover on the white, and I'm driving a left-hand side truck in the left lane, and I've got to find where Wembley is. Well, I'd hardly been out of it. I'd never been out of Australia. So to find my way from there with a non-speaking English groom, it was like, oh my God. So I studied the map and I found it, but I'm sitting on this side, driving this truck in this left lane. And I don't know how I found my way there, but I did. And it was an amazing show. And it was lovely because I'm not being rude or anything, but it was great to talk to English people, like to English-speaking people. I sort of had to learn Dutch so much to be able to get through with everything. So that was a big experience, and that was amazing. And my wife and daughter, I hadn't seen them for 8 months, so it was great. It was great to catch up with them. They'd flown over. The UK people had looked after us amazing. The Whitaker boys and Jack Billington, they were unbelievable. They were just so welcoming, and to be in a lineup with them was just amazing because Michael won the Horse of the Year Grand Prix. Jack Billington run second. John had run third. I'd run fourth, and Nick had run fifth. And you know what? We never got a photo of it. So that was amazing. And then back to Europe, and then I finished off the World Cup shows. Amsterdam was my last World Cup show, which was, I've never jumped as big a track inside in all my life. And my owner, Mrs. Hunter, said, I don't think you should start. And I just said, well, I'm here, you know, I'm going to start before the Worlds. And he jumped an 8-fault round and run 7th. He was unbelievable. And because it was like, there was very few clean. And that's those sort of things really stick in my mind. And also going back from that, when I was at Amsterdam for that World Cup, I was out early working a horse at 6 o'clock in the morning, just warming in because we then have to do, you know, your big trot up and everything. And so I wanted him feeling really good for the trot up. So I was out working, and there's this young lad sitting in the stands, in the warm-up indoor, and he's sitting there, and I'm working my horse and that. And anyway, as an Aussie, we always say hello to everyone. I pulled up and I said, how are you, mate? And he said, I'm good. And I said, what are you here for? And he said, I am here sitting, and he's sitting in a big flannelette shirt, a pair of jeans and T-boots on as a normal person. He said, I'm here to go to Yarn Tops. And I said, right, that is good. As a worker. He said, no, I will be a rider and I'll be the best in the world. And this was the guy that rode Casal, and he ended up being the best in the world. So, you just meet, you never know who you're going to meet. And if you're an open person and friendly, you meet a lot of very good people. You do.
It's like a credible experience.
Unbelievable. And and as I said, I was the oldest working pupil over there. I was 35 at this time. And all these other young guys, Guillain, and, there was a lot of them. Guillain doubled off and I sort of can't think of them now. I normally think of them all the time, but you've got me a little bit. So it was a very good experience, and it's very sad that I didn't get to go to the Worlds. The Modra horse was sold to America after the last World Cup that I did, which was very, very disappointing, but that's business, and it was out of my hands. I was only the rider. So I sort of didn't have any say in that. So that was the finish of that part of my life. And so Modra went off to America and became the rookie horse of the year for 2 or 3 years with the amateur. And and I came home. So that was my first part of Europe for me. And oh my God, like trying to drive a little red all around Europe to these shows with this little car, no bigger than, it was tiny, and putting all my tack in and everything. And we were fortunate then when you got an invite to a show, you were able to, they'd give you a motel room. Their directions and my directions were totally different. It was a good experience. And I'll never forget it. It'll always live with me.
That sounds incredible. What did you take away from that experience from when you came back to Australia? What did you see in Europe that Australia wasn't offering at the time? It must have felt like a different world.
Yeah. And I just said to my wife, it is costing us so much money to be there, to do this. She said, learn how to train, learn how to coach. And so my thing was, if I wasn't riding, I'd be sitting at the warm-up area, watching all the coaches and all the good, fantastic riders and all the fantastic horses jump and warm in and do things. And so my investment for that was, I wanted to just learn so much from how they train and what they do, and then to be able to bring that back to our country here, to Australia. So that was my investment, So, and that's what I did. And like I was a sponge. I just wanted to sit and watch and learn, and, like someone like Roloff that was sitting in that stand that morning. And then now, like him and I, like if I went back to Europe, we'd go up and we'd shake hands and hug, because we became really good mates. And he was sitting in the stand, and he was doing the same thing. He just wanted to get better and better and better. He told me, I want to be the best in the world. And that's what he ended up being, So, if you work hard enough and you try hard enough, you can get things to happen. But my idea, my thing had to be that I had to learn to be a coach and understand horse and rider at every stage and whatever the rider was, I want to be able to work with. And I try and do a lot of country clinics, because they miss out so much, and they just don't get the input, and they don't get the exposure or give them the exposure of what it can be like, So there's a lot of good country kids out there that are good riders, and obviously, the expenses of it now is a bit unfortunate, where it makes it a little tough for them. So, but you've still got to feed them a positive.
This episode is proudly supported by Mr. Breeches, and we sincerely thank them for backing the podcast and our sport. Mr. Breeches is an exclusive menswear range of workwear and competition breeches, shirts, socks and caps. Masculine, comfortable and durable clothing. The brand for all male equestrians. Visit their website today at mrbreeches.com. Now back to our guest. And you did come back. You learnt all of that and you came back and then you ended up going to the Olympic Games. So I think we should just talk a little bit about that. So can you talk us through a little bit about the qualifying period leading up to the Games? The horse you had, tell us how you got that and how that came about, and then how you went through the qualifying.
Yeah, well, okay. So I came home and I'd left a very good young horse here with my wife, and then she did not want to ride him. Rod Brown and John McMillan were invested in the horse that I had left here. So we'd sent him up to Equus for them to manage while I was away. So he went to Equus for Rod to ride while I was away, and he done an amazing job on him. The horse got a little injury and was out for a while. So, and they were concerned that he may not come back, but it was only a minor injury, so he was fine. Rod only took him out once and he won on him. He done a very good job with him. And then when I got home, he literally came straight back for me to, I'd had a goal with this horse called Zazu, which he'd come from a big racing adjustment property where I'd done all the breaking in for one lovely chap called Bruce McHugh. He owned a property called Shipton Lodge, just outside of Camden. And so I'd already done all the breaking in for him over 3 years, all the yearlings from the sales and that, and whatever was bred on the property. And so, and he'd had this big horse, which we called, his nickname was Francis. But as his jumping name was Zazu, because when he started to come onto the scene, the Lion King had come out, and my daughter loved the Lion King. So this Zazu was an extinct bird, or just about extinct. So, and I just said, well, this is the most amazing horse I've ever had. And so she named him Zazu, but his nickname at the stable where he was Francis. And he only had one trial because he had to have an amazing extension on the barriers because they could not fit him in. He was so big, so long, and he was like 3 parts of a horse. It was so different. He had a short neck, a Roman nose, a long back, and then a roachy back at the end. He was just so different. I've never seen a thoroughbred like it. And he was out of a Sir Tristram mare and by a horse called Masqué, and it should have been like it should have been a 500,000 yearling at the sales, but he never got that far because he was so ugly. But he was beautiful in his own right. And so he was there at the farm where I was breaking in from Mr. McHugh, and he just said, well, he's not going to run. He's too big to run. So he said, you want to take him and try him. And I just said, well, okay, I'll take him and try him. And he was the most difficult horse in the sense of he would not go over a pole on the ground. It was ridiculous. I used to have to run around the round yard with this horse on a lead and run over the poles on the floor and try and get him to go over them because he did not want to go over them. And anyway, I gave up on him, and I said to Susie, I just said, he's not going to cut it. And we had really good friends that were hunters. And I thought, well, he's perfect, big, old-fashioned type to go hunting. So I gave him to them to go hunting. But he chased him out of the paddock so many times that they just said, we don't want him. So I had to take him back. And I said, well, I'm going to have to try and do something with him. So I did, and I started to ride him and jump him, and he rode like a pony. He had the most beautiful mouth. A guy called Roy Davis had that run. Roy Davis and Tony Hall, they'd run Shipton Lodge, and they'd done an amazing job breaking this horse in. He had the most beautiful mouth, really good. And anyway, so I started to ride him and trying to get him to go over the poles and that. And in the end, we got him going sort of half, and he'd just try and jump so high in the air. It was amazing. He'd just try and go so high. And I remember taking him to our first Sydney Jump Club, and I tried to jump around just a baby track, and he broke 4 rails. Because he was so big and he would go so high, but then just land like a lead balloon. He would just land. And he broke 4 rails. And so I said, so we're going to have to pay some money here, for these rails. And anyway, so I persevered with him, and then he started to go. And then we done a couple of other small, we took him away to other places so people couldn't see him, because he was quite embarrassing how he started. And we done a few small jump clubs at other places, and then it just clicked. He got the idea of how to jump, how to actually use himself. And then we used to go A, B, C, D in our grades. So he won every championship all the way through to B grade. He did. He was unfortunate. He ran second in the maturity to a very good horse that Chuggy was riding, Diamond B. He goes there. It was a beauty, but he'd won every other championship all the way through, and he just was a freak. He was a freak. He was unorthodox, like beautiful in his shape, in his body when he jumped, but always a little long leg. But was just so careful and so rideable, unbelievably rideable. And like to get to the games was always my goal. But he turned 9 at the games, so he was very young for a horse to be at the Olympics. And the selectors felt that he was a little young, but he'd already won 2 of the main qualifiers that we had, because then we had our qualifiers in Australia for 2000, which were fantastic. They were very well done. They were proper tracks. Everything was done. And he won 2 of the qualifiers and placed in the other one as well. No fault of his. I got lost at one and missed one fence and things like that, and as you do. But he was a freak. He was a freak. We actually employed a really good friend of ours to groom for us, to just specifically look after him, because he was a bit like a stallion. He was quite naughty. He would, and he needed someone proper and someone only to just manage him. And we had a beautiful girl called Rochelle that she actually married Tygo Sukatani, and she was grooming for me, and obviously met him at the games, and they ended up hooking up and marrying, and now they've got a family and they're wonderful. But she was amazing with him. She could sort of really organise him and organise me. She was very good at organising me, because I'm sort of someone that's always worked in a system. I have a system, and I have to work with that system all the way through. And it's not hard, but it's just how I work and what I find works for me. So this horse, Zazu, was a freak. He was the best horse that I'll ever have, and very lucky to have a horse like that. And so trainable. He was just amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
So you had qualified for Sydney, and
Yep.
you were on the team. And how
Yep.
much more special was it that it was a home games?
It was amazing. And look, I must say, like, it was one of the best games. I've been to 2 games. It was the best games that I've ever been to. And it was just so friendly, just so well. And we only lived 40 minutes down the road from where we were competing, and where I was actually living in the village. We were not so far away. Also very special that my parents hadn't seen me ride very much, and they'd been able to make the journey up from Bemboka to Sydney, and they stayed at our house, which was very easy. Susie could drive them in each day, 40 minutes, so it was perfect. But the whole thing was like, you're home, you got a home crowd. The most nerve-wracking thing of all of that was the very first day, I was the very last rider to ride. So everyone had stayed to watch me ride. And you enter into the ring at an Olympic Games, and you are on your home territory, and you are the last rider, and everyone, like thousands of people, had stayed to watch. You've got to nearly have, like I have now, nearly a tear in your eye. And for him to go out and fight and do the job he did was amazing. He jumped a 4 3/4 round, I think, or something. So 4 faults and 3 time faults then, or 3/4 time faults, whatever it was. It was amazing. It was, you sort of bring back old memories. It was freakish. And it was like, I walked it, and I could walk under the rails with my helmet on, and I'm going, holy shit, this is massive. And it was a full-on positive track And I remember John Vance, he was there helping Leopoldo. He was the second, of course, designer, and he was there. And I remember him saying to me when I came into the ring, and I looked at him, he said, attack. All you want to do is attack. And then I've got Rod and Susie saying, this is going to really suit you. And I'm going, and then I had Alexa Bell, which was our coach, and she's sort of going, oh, well, I don't know. What you're going to do. And I've got Rod and Susie, which were fortunate enough they could walk the course with me as well. And then I had to go back to sign language with them because they were up in the stand there. And I'm sort of last to go, 76th or 79th. I don't know. I can't remember, but it was in the 70s where it was. And I said to Alexa, okay, I'm going to watch 3 horses go that I think suit me. I've watched, and then I'm not going to watch any more. And simple as. So I spent the whole day. I watched 3 horses that I thought that's how I want to ride the track. And then I went away and I went back to the stable block with Rochelle, and I sat on my bag of chaff. I had a 3/4 bag of chaff that I used to have a sleep on before I'd go and do a big class. And I sat there, and that was that. And then when it was my time, I went up. And then for all those people to stay and watch, it was, I can't thank them enough. It was unbelievable. It sort of made you want to fight and get a job done. And he went out and he was amazing. He was unbelievable and continued for the whole games to be amazing. He did. So, so it was a good experience. So you nearly brought me to tears on that because I haven't thought about it for a while. So I apologise.
No, it's lovely. It's lovely. And you look back on that experience, and is there anything in particular that stays with you the most? Was it the horse, the crowd, your support team, or was it just all of that?
Look, the only thing that I think about every day, Jo, I'm really sorry, but I think about every day is how I buggered up on the last day in the final. I could have been in the top 10. He was jumping so well, but what happened was we had the Nations Cup the next day after the individual, and it had rained so much. It was really bad storms. And I remember before I went in the ring, Michael Whitaker was just before me, and his groom standing at the out gate as you go in, and I'm sort of warmed up, and we had one little warm-up fence that before he went in. And she's standing there to get this horse, and the electricity in the air from the storm and the lightning, her hair was standing straight up. And I've gone, oh my God, look at this. And that was one thing that I thought. But what had happened, it had rained so much, the open water had become just like another puddle on the arena. For sure you had your beautiful sides and that on it, but it was just like he started to think, well, I can just canter through the water. So he had a foot in the water in the Nations Cup on the first round, and that's all he had. He had the 4 faults in the first round of the Nations Cup. He just had a foot in the water and jumped the rest all clean. And then he came out in the second round and he had another foot in the water and had one other, had a skinny gait down towards the end, but he was feeling the pinch a bit. He was just turned 9, so he was a bit tired. So he had that down. So he had a 4-fault and 8-fault, but which still kept us in the top 10. And we're still around the top 10 to top 14, no more than that. And then, so in the final, they started off, quite big and roll back, and then you had to roll back to the open water. And then you had just a big 7 up to this goddamn skinny gate and this white gate, which I ended up actually getting off JV and burning because I didn't like it. So I tried so hard to make him jump the open water that I'd sort of lost my position. I dropped my eye, didn't get my eye on the next line. And it was the very first time he'd ever stopped, and no fault of his because I'd given him such a bad ride to it. And I was shocked. Zazu was shocked because we'd never stopped. And I just thought, oh my God, and I still had this massive track to finish all the way around. And I thought, I don't know what's going to happen. And anyway, we represented and he jumped it, and then he jumped the next, and he was really frazzled, thinking, what's going on? What's happened? And but he finished off jumping very well. I finished off with, I think, with time and at about 20 faults or 22 faults. But he jumped the last line they had in the final, in the first round of the final, it was like unbelievably tough. It was like a triple bar out of a corner, 4 massive strides to a double of Liverpool's front and back, 2 short strides to a big 7 to a Knox going home. And he just ate it up. He just regrouped. I regrouped, and he finished. And I've never been so proud of a horse in all my life. I came out with 22 faults. Who gives a shit? He was a champion. Champion in my eyes and a champion in a lot of other people's eyes. So that was a good experience. I would change a lot of things now if it ever happened again. My fitness and his fitness and weren't good enough. I got tired and he got tired. I think, yeah, it needed to be more intense. And the ground then at SIAC was not great. They had to work really hard to jump. And a lot of horses got injuries and a lot of horses were slipping and sliding and that. So, but our surfaces have got so much better now. It's a proper professional sport now with professional grounds. And so you see the best of the best jumping, you know. But I just loved it. I loved it. It was great. It was great. It was heartbreaking in a way, but it was amazing in a way, you know. Like to finish in the top sort of 25 in the world, hey, that'll do me. That's all right. I can live with that. Yeah, so that's it.
Horizon Show Jumps was founded by people who genuinely love the sport, and that shows in everything they do. What started back in 2013 as a search for better quality jumps has grown into one of Australia's leading suppliers, with their fences now seen at major events like Melbourne Royal, Equitana and Auschamps. Horizon specialise in custom-made jumps for private arenas, eye-catching sponsor fences that really make brands pop, and a full range of hire equipment with designs that are regularly refreshed so courses always feel professional and current. And now Horizon are also building high-quality stables, carrying that same attention to detail and understanding of horses across your whole setup. So if you're looking to lift your arena, your barn or your next event, head to horizonshowjumps.com.au. And now back to our guest. You'd mentioned that you'd come back from Europe the first time and that coaching, you'd really picked up all those skills on coaching, and that was going to be a big part of what you did going forward. So I just want to unpack that a little bit with you, because you've got such a reputation in the sport for being such an incredible coach, and you've just shaped so many people in the sport. And I want to get your thoughts on that. And what is it about the coaching that has really kept you engaged over the years?
It's the riders and obviously the horses, but it's like I just feel that I can talk to nearly all riders, and we can get whether they're look, and it's really amazing because I will teach from elite to whatever level. I have no problem if they've got a goal to go to be whatever they want to do. They want to just go cross rails, amateurs, you know, good young riders, good juniors, right the way through, good children, all the way through. I feel I always want to stay so open in my coaching that I can work with all, because I feel in my growing up, and I was very limited to coaching, and I want to feel that I came back from Europe wanting to open up and say, hey, this is how they're doing it in Europe. This is what we've got to get better at. This is what we've got to do. And okay, so that's at the elite level, yeah. And then you can still take it back and you can still give it to other riders that you've got to listen to their goals of how far they want to go and what they want to do. And if you can listen to their goals and you can train them to that goal that they want to achieve in a safe way, in a good way, in a way that they feel really, really like they are jumping at Olympic Games. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I do. And I do a lot of country clinics. I try and do a lot of country clinics because I want them, because they're the ones that are missing out, you know, like all our local, like around Melbourne, Sydney, they've got super good coaches and that. But they don't have to travel that much because they've got their whole lot of riders there, A lot of these other riders just miss out. And I'll tell you, there's some so good riders. You see a natural rider out in the country, he might, he or she might have a little poly saddle on and that, but you know what? They've got the best bloody eye I've seen and the best rhythm I've seen. They've got a rhythm like Kermo and you just go, you know what? These could be good kids, and if you just are there and just encourage him to keep going, keep going with it, try and find one day where you can actually go and do a Syak or go and do a Bonia or whatever, or a Willinga, try and get to one of those and ride there. Okay. You might feel a bit intimidated, but it'll only get easier, like if you stay there and not go there, you'll always be intimidated by those other riders. And yeah, so I've always felt, and I always look at a rider and their horse or their pony or their Clydie or whatever they're riding, that I'm sitting on the horse. This is how I'd like to ride it or try and make it go. And this is what I say to the riders. But I keep it very open-minded and I keep it in the way that, don't allow the cost to stop you from doing something. Find a way to go and do it. Like if you want to do it bad enough, you'll do it. It's not about trying to buy. I'm embarrassed when I have to find a horse for someone, for a family, for a junior rider. I'm embarrassed with the price of these horses and things like that because it's just crazy sometimes, and I know they can't afford it, So at the end, you've got to make what we've got, you've got to believe what you got will work, and that's what you've got to keep doing. Okay.
No, I think that's fantastic advice. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. You and Sue have built a life around horses together. What has it meant to share that journey with someone who obviously is so special to you and who understands the sport so well also?
Yeah, like we know nothing else now, so we've had a wonderful 9 years, got an amazing daughter and son-in-law and 2 beautiful grandchildren and 3 other brothers that we call ours from Mark's side. Both of us today coaching, and we both throw each. I walk out when Susie's coaching and she'll throw something at me about doing this with this horse, and I'll just say, well, I think you need to do this, this, and this, and then I'll be out there coaching, and I'll just say, I'm struggling with this on the flat, and she'll give me an idea what to do with that rider and horse on the flat. And it's like any relationship and marriage and partnership or whatever you want to call it, like you have your ups and downs but you have to bloody work through it because, I can't afford to get rid of her and she can't afford to get rid of me. So, no, but we work really hard, not because we have to, because we want to, and we want, all our riders, we always love to hear back from them with their results and things like that, and that means more than anything. Getting a text or a phone call to saying, we've done this and that worked and whatever, So yeah, but it's pretty bloody hard now.
But at this stage of your career, what gives you the most satisfaction in the sport?
Most satisfaction now is for me seeing my riders. The most satisfaction is to see them grow and believe that they can get better and better. And look, a lot of the riders we work with, we only work with like 4-cylinder horses, whereas a lot of them now have got 6-cylinder horses. So we're sort of working really hard to keep these riders, these young riders, and that up to what is out there and never feel like, that you're just not good enough. We've got some great kids, some really good kids, and older riders as well. I was given the opportunity to work with the elite event riders last year now. That to me was so easy, but I still found a lot of little faults that they had, So another set of eyes there that hadn't been there. Thank you to Stuart Tenney and Catherine Davies. They gave me the opportunity to do a clinic at Chrissy Harris's beautiful place. And I had to test myself a little bit more then, because I hadn't been doing those really elite riders. And that was really good. I really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed it. For reasons I wasn't able to follow up with other clinics with them. But the feedback was very positive and very good, which was very nice. But sometimes you need testing. And that was a good test again to go, okay, these guys want to go to the Worlds, So, you've got to be on your game here and try and just tweak it a little bit more and make them a little bit better, or give them a bit more input and another thing to think about. And so that was great. That was really good, really good. I enjoyed that very much, very much. So, and look, when I can start flying and driving again, which I can just now, hopefully I'll do more of those. As well.
I know you and I had a quick discussion that you've had a little bit of an illness recently. Do you want to share a little bit about what you've been through recently?
Yeah, look, it was a weird thing, Jo. It's a virus that it sort of affects your nervous system in your spine. It's got a weird-ass name, and Guillain Barre is the name of it. It's sort of the opposite of MS. So MS, the poor people that have MS, they're doing very well with it now, but it affects your fluid on your spinal cord, and it attacks your fluid on your spinal cord, where the virus that I got, it attacks the lining of your spinal cord to the fluid. And it's a weird thing because it just paralyzed me. It was like, in a way, having a stroke. Well, they thought I'd had a stroke, but it wasn't a stroke. It was this Guillain-Barré virus. And so to wake up in the morning and not be able to talk and able to walk it was just really weird, really weird. And then to be in hospital and have to learn to talk again and to walk again, it was something that I'd never, ever thought of, and I think they say they get maybe 3 cases in a year with it. I'm quite fit. So I was very lucky that I sort of tried to get up and get going very early with this virus. And once they established what I had and I had the treatment that I needed to have, then I started to learn to walk again and obviously talk, and which was really weird to have a speech pathologist sitting with you. Can you say car? And things like that was really weird. And just not have to have sort of 2 people hold you up to walk. It was quite amazing and quite scary when I sort of knew what was going on. But I had a goal. They said 6 months. I said 6 weeks. For me, I had physio 2 times a week of getting going and to be able to walk and run. My goal was in 6 weeks that I could run again. And I just finished last week, the 6 weeks, and got my pass. I had to show them that I could drive a manual. And so I had to be able to put my foot on the clutch and brake and do all that and change gears. And I had to run from our house to the barn and around the barn and back, which is about 200 metres. I had to be able to do that, then run up and down the steps and do things like that. It was not really normal, but it was passable. And I'm getting better every day from that, So, but I made it in 6 weeks. I didn't want 6 months. My best friend, Brad Franklin, Professor Brad Franklin, he just says, it's going to take a while. And I just said, no, I'm doing it. I want to do it in 6 weeks. I've got to get back and get going again. And I'm back riding again. Just started riding. So, so it's all good now. Thanks, Jo. But it was the weird-ass thing. It will come in waves. I will have a bad day every now and then, but I just get out and keep walking and keep going until I get it right.
Yeah, you speak about it so matter-of-factly, but to me it sounds like quite a terrifying thing to go through.
It's just so, yeah. So hopefully no more infusions. I'm finished with them, I hope, and you got to work through it. You got to be tough.
I've got a little bit here that I want to chat with you about, which is a big part of your story is producing horses. And you've talked about the horses that you're working with, and thoroughbreds have been a massive part of your story, haven't they? And you've had a lot of success with them.
Yeah.
Can you talk me a little bit through what thoroughbreds have meant to you in your career and what's so special about them?
Well, the thoroughbred is that was our horse at the time, we didn't know about the warm bloods so much, and the warm bloods that were out here early on in years before were very old fashioned, and we used to call them clunkers because they just weren't proper jumpers, and they weren't. So the thoroughbred was always available and accessible to get. So you would try a thoroughbred. And the amazing thing was, I talked to a lot of the older riders, like, I can't remember sacking too many thoroughbreds. They all wanted to jump, and I don't know whether we had the old English line then and the old New Zealand lines, and that were very good horses. And look, the thoroughbred has taken me all around the world. It made me the thoroughbreds. It take me around the world. It take me to the Olympic Games. It's done everything for me. I would never walk away. If I could find another good thoroughbred, I would have it tomorrow. Simple as. They've just been such a good thing in our sport. They've been really good. I watch now the ones off the track at the shows and that, and, there's some bloody champions. There's some really good ones in them. We've lost the really good lines. They've sort of died out, over years. You find them sort of second or third generation back now in a lot of the thoroughbred lines. But they've been good toilers. They've been the best thing for a lot of riders. Like Chuggy had amazing thoroughbreds, and we've had amazing thoroughbreds. We've won futurities, we've won, World Cups, we've had 3 go to the Olympic Games, like with other riders and myself. It's just been amazing. And they've been amazing to us. And it's a shame, I watched the yearling sales and that, and everything is about now getting a 2-year-old. So they're just little fast things, and that's what they breed, which is a bit of a shame. I watched the races on the weekend, and in 2000 to 2600 to 3200 races, they're nearly all imported horses from the UK or from somewhere over there, which is a real shame. We're losing that old, fashioned, good English type thoroughbred, and we're getting these little squat things now, and that worth 2 million, 3 million at the sales, because people want to see them just go fast, whereas before it was all about having that good, staying line horse, and we just don't. We're just not breed. I'm hoping that we start to breed them more in Australia again, because we need to. And instead of having to buy all these imports from overseas that are running over, your 3600 or whatever, we need to get back and get those lines going a bit more here as well, And New Zealand have the right idea. They do not race until they're 3-year-old. And that, to me, I love that. I love it, how they just let them mature. I break in, I don't break in now, but I used to break in always the 2-year-olds from all the sales. And like, they're tiny, and they've got to be up and running as 2-year-olds, which, like a lot of people love, and there's a lot of money in the 2-year-old racing, with your golden slipper and your silver slipper and all these other races. But it'd be just lovely to get back to having some old fashioned lines come through, or having a few stallions that can produce, good, big types for show jumping again, because we're just losing that. One was sent to me the other day to try. It was 15.2, and it was 4-year-old. And, like I said to my wife, I should just make it for my grandson, like I'll make a good little jumper for my grandson, But but the thoroughbreds, to me, they've made my career. They've kept me in my career of being able to do what I've been able to do. And that, for sure, I ride warm bloods now, but you give me a good thoroughbred, I'll jump off that warm blood and jump on that thoroughbred any day.
It seems to me that marketing horses is challenging, and that there has been no quick and easy platform dedicated to connecting performance horses with potential new owners. So I developed Pro Horse Match to do exactly that. Based on the concept of a dating app, you can save your preferences, e.g. discipline, competition level, pedigree, age, price range, etc., and receive email and push notifications when a horse is listed that meets those criteria. Most importantly, Listing a horse is quick and easy and can be done in less than a minute. The in-app chat is a key feature of the app, allowing for a real-time discussion between sellers and potential buyers to determine whether contact details are shared and the conversation should be taken offline. It is currently free to list with no payment details collected, so I encourage you to visit prohorsematch.com and join the hundreds of users already registered and check out the quality horses listed. Now back to our guest. You've seen the sport across the decades, and I'd just like to get your thoughts on where Australia fits in the big picture now of the sport. What do you think we've done well, and where do you think maybe we still fall short compared to Europe and other major international systems?
Yeah, well, like I was very fortunate. I came from the finish of what we called the old school into the modern school of show jumping. And that was going from no more tie downs. You couldn't tie your legs down. You couldn't do this or couldn't do that. To the modern where everyone's become, like we used to have like people like George Morris and Jay Hayes and some really, really good coaches, but they were very much equitation and classical and learning. And I love it how we've gone really classical in our riding. It's just beautiful. We've got to still keep it open for every young rider to have the opportunity to learn how to ride the best they can ride and as classical as they can be. As long as they're classical, but still natural. I don't just want these young riders, juniors, young riders, becoming riders that classical to ride, but they actually have not feel that they need for their natural instincts to make things work correctly, So, yeah, it's growing, and I hope it grows in the right way. I just don't want people feeling like they've got to try and keep up with the Joneses. I want them to feel like they can still be their own normal self and still find their progress through this sport and be able to enjoy it. And the thing is now, we all have to have a budget of what shows we can do and what shows we can't do because of reasons. So we need this whole country still to keep producing really good quality event areas, like Chrissy Harrison Stonewall is becoming amazing. You've got your Bonio. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Caboolture, is starting to put another 2 new arenas in. Toowoomba are starting to do well. Lara Pinto is maybe off the cards for a bit. Then you got Willinga that are producing a really good areas to go and jump. And this is what we need. We need more and more of those. SIAC are getting to, I think they're getting 2 new arenas, I've heard. So that will be amazing, And that was disappointing because before the games and that, John Howard, I think, was still in. He was still the Prime Minister then. This SIAC was supposed to be our hub for everyone to go to with good arenas. Okay, it's not worked. It hasn't worked, which is really disappointing because it's an Olympic site. It should have been kept. Shepparton have a fantastic ground. Werribee have the great polo fields now. They're starting to jump up and happen. We've got a new one down at the Yarra Valley that's happening, and it's going to be amazing. So that needs to keep happening. Good coaching needs to keep happening. It needs to be kept in a costing that everyone can do it. This is the thing. The costing's just getting out of control. It would be great if we could send some of our riders to Europe for a year. They need to do a year over there to be able to feel not intimidated by those riders in Europe. EA needs to be able to get us into more shows over there and get riders over there or the riders that have funded themselves to get over there, get them into more shows so they can get really seasoned to being with the 5-star riders and things like that. So then you bring it back to here. My goal is we can get them over there and give them 1 year experience of being there and seeing how it all works, then to be able to come back to here and then I would love to see what we did before the 2000 games is have our qualifiers here, not in Europe, not have to find the money to have to be in Europe and get into a show for a Nations Cup or whatever to get into a show to have to qualify for the games. I would love if they could just go over there, get the feeling, get the experience of being there, live there, get into their culture, know how it all works. So then we could just bring them all back. What would be amazing to have them all back here and qualify for Olympics? It would be unbelievable. And we've got, property and big equestrian properties now that are setting up for these sort of things that we can accommodate for. That's what I would love. I would love to see our qualifiers here to just make it, more about Australia, not having to be in Europe all the time to do that, So I don't know. People might jump on me and hate it, but I would love to see it more of our riders go to Europe, get 12 months experience, be able to come back here, have our qualifiers here. We've got the best course builders in the world here. We've got some of the best arenas being built here. Why not do it here? And save the cost of the ones that can afford to do it can go there. That's my sort of thing. I would love to see it come back here. And it worked for 2000. It didn't work so bad. Gavin had been in the States. He'd done his time and got his experience over there. He'd been in Europe before many times. Loomis, he'd been to Europe and rode at the Worlds and that. He had his experience there. I'd been in Europe for 2 years and that. Ronnie struggled a little because he hadn't had that experience, but he learned a lot from the games. So, yeah, I just feel we need to bring it back home a bit more, and have some cracking jumping here instead of having to watch, the reels of everyone jumping over there.
I've talked with other people on the podcast about it's not just the cost of your horse or horses over to Europe and entering the shows and living over there, but it's also the fact that you're leaving behind a business back in Australia, which, that's your income. So you're walking away from your income, plus you've got the added expense.
You're taking one horse where you could have 6 horses here, So you're going with your 1 or your 2 horses to take to Europe, and you're leaving maybe 6 horses at home that are missing out. So your business is stopping there, and you're just putting all your money pit into that over there. Look, I think there's nothing wrong, and I'm really positive for people to go to Europe variants. But then I just think EA and whatever here, we need to step up and then start to really. We've got, as we just spoke, we've got the equestrian properties to go to, and that they can accommodate for all of it. Whereas when we qualified for the games in 2000, we were jumping on agricultural showgrounds. And they were just making them better, They tried to make them better, and they did. They tried their butt off, and the gear became better and everything. But after that, it just felt like it just dropped off, and we never kept it up and going, So so that's my idea.
I think that sounds good.
Thoughts. Yeah. And a lot of people mightn't like it, but yeah, I just feel we need to get back. And Australians are very, very good riders. They're as good as the best in the world. They are. Yeah. They need that little bit of exposure in Europe, and then come back, bring it back, and use it here.
We've got a tradition though on the podcast where each guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who it'll be. So I do have a question for you. Yours comes from Les Bunning, and it's in line with what we've just been talking about. So he would like to know, how do we go about training our riders to ride a little more forward so we can get rid of the time penalties and make that an easier transition for when riders do go overseas? Is it a rider thing? Is it a course designer thing? He just wants to know your opinion on that.
I'll take you back, Jo, and good on you, Les. That's very good. I go back to the coaching that we teach them. If you ask, it'd be interesting to ask young riders, juniors, young riders, children, maybe not so much. Juniors, young riders, do they know 310, 325, 350, 400? Do they know what that means? That is my question to that. 375, the World Cup's most 375, How do you know? Do I just go out there and walk that course and then I'm told it's 375. How do I ride that at 375? How do I walk that course at 375? Where do I make a turn up? Where do I do that? Have I trained that? Have I trained that to do that? Have I trained at 400? Things like that. So it all relates back to our coaching. I believe our coaching, our course builders, they do what they do. And then we've got to do what they've given us. So I believe it. The coach comes back to the coach to teach those riders how to ride those, up tempos and what we've got to do. If I said to a rider, okay, it's a 4-year-old class, what is the tempo you got to ride for your 4-year-old class? They would have no idea that it's 310. They have no idea. Okay, we're in a World Cup. The ground hasn't allowed us to ride 400. We're riding at 375. What's the difference in that? Things like that. I just might have to make 2 inside turns or 1 inside turn to make 375. It all comes back to your coach, I reckon. That's my opinion. And that's where we need to be educating them as we're training them to get to that level of that class.
Great answer. I think Les will be very happy with your answer to that.
Right. Okay. Tell him I said hi too.
No, will do. Have you got a question that you would like to leave for our next guest?
Which is Kermo?
Oh, no, I'm not telling you that. You're not allowed to know.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay. So my question to the next rider is, have you got a groom that you really rely on, that you believe that you can go to the Worlds or the Olympics or anywhere, that you've got a groom that you really feel that you need to have there and work with you, that works? Because that's what worked for me, having my groom. She was absolute there and cop some bloody shit sometimes, and no fault of hers, but I'd be frustrated and she would just take my horse and walk away and let me just blow my steam off on my own, and that was that.
All right, I'll pass that on. I think that sounds great.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's been, it's been so lovely to get to know you and to listen to all of that. It's just fantastic and so interesting. And I hope that I will get to see you in person one day. Come and tap me on the shoulder one day, and
we will catch up with a big hug. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's been great. Thank you so much.